Fox News alert, fraud running rampant in this country. We have been tracking it all across America. And look at this. We've taken you from Minnesota to Maine, down to Massachusetts, and all the way over to California. This is the Saturday in America investigation across the country. Programs within these states, Medicaid, autism, daycare services. The grand total of fraud is estimated to be as high as $19 billion. Some estimates much, much higher than that. But all that money did not stay here. As we reported earlier this year, DHS sources told us nearly $700 million of bulk cash in suitcases flown out of the Minneapolis airport since 2024, heading to Somalia. And over in Maine, much of the same. In the Autism Services Program alone, the Health and Human Services Inspector General revealed to us that the state made at least $45 million in improper Medicaid payments. Nearly $30 million of that was federally funded. That is your taxpayer dollars. Then in Massachusetts, the state's auditor released a report revealing massive fraud plaguing many of the state's public assistance programs. The total amount of fraud in fiscal year 2025 alone was nearly $12 million in that case. And as we touched on last week, there's a massive fraud problem in Gavin Newsom's backyard. CMS Administrator Dr. Oz revealed hospice care centers have become riddled with waste, and he says 2,000 centers may be fraudulent. He is cracking down. Now we're learning, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, that the fraud in the Golden State could be as high as $3.5 billion, he says. And according to a whistleblower, Newsom was fully aware. President Trump is also aware, and he's taking action, creating a task force to eliminate fraud. It will be led by Vice President J.D. Vance and Vice Chair, who is my next guest, of the Anti-Fraud Task Force, Andrew Ferguson. Now, in a memo from the task force, I have it here, which was shared exclusively with us, they plan to focus on what they call high-speed, low-verification programs. You're looking at the full list of the programs right now Trump is focusing on. It includes Medicare, Medicaid, which spends $2 trillion a year. They're also looking into the Department of Labor's unemployment insurance's $43 billion with the B a year spending spree. And yesterday, the task force hosted its first meeting.
Americans have turned over trillions of their tax dollars to social welfare programs to help their neighbors and fellow citizens through hard times. They've done so on the basis of social trust, the belief that their government, state and federal, will do the right things with their dollars. If we fail to address it, the fabric of our nation will swiftly unravel.
Let's bring in the Vice Chair of the White House Anti-Fraud Task Force, joining us exclusively, Andrew Ferguson. Andrew, I watched all day yesterday. I've been reading through your memo, and one line sticks out to me at the very top. It says that by one estimate, fraud in federal benefits programs could result in losses of about $250 billion per year, and the true number may be higher. What are we looking at?
Well, I mean, I think we should start with the list of spending programs that you just put up. It just shows how unbelievably generous Americans are. Every year, we turn over trillions of our dollars to our fellow citizens to help them in hard times. And the whole way that these systems are set up, Stephen Miller said it perfectly yesterday. These systems are set up for a high-trust society. We turn over money to the government pays it to people in need, and we all expect that people are going to participate in these programs honestly, and the reality is that they're not. And that government officials, especially in blue states, have been in on this for a very, very long time. And, you know, what we're also learning as we've dug into these agencies to figure out what's going on is that the Biden administration turned off huge amounts of the anti-fraud prevention measures that are supposed to be in all these agencies, and we're just letting money go blindly out the door. We've turned it back on. We're figuring out exactly what the Biden administration did. And most importantly, the Department of Justice is gearing up to do mass prosecution efforts against fraudsters, people who benefited from the fraud, and people who covered up the fraud. Colin McDonald, the president just appointed him as the Assistant Attorney General for fraud. He's a brilliant career prosecutor. He's brought cases against fraudsters, cartels, big-time politicians and public corruption cases, this is how we have to fight it. We have to fight it by prosecuting the people who benefited and covered it up, and by turning off the spigot in these agencies to make sure that the tens and tens of billions of dollars of our money, this is our money, that would go out the door to fraudsters stays in the agencies and goes to people who actually need it. And that's the real crime, Kayleigh. It's not just that they're taking money out of all of our pockets as taxpayers. Every single time a fraudster gets our hard-earned money, that money is going to a criminal rather than to an American who actually needs it, rather than to an American that we've been paying to try to help in hard times. And we've got to stop it. And President Trump is the first president to take this seriously. And that's why he set up this task force, so we can stop the fraud and punish the offenders.
You just said that the Biden administration turned off the fraud protections. Why would your predecessors do that?
You're going to have to ask them. The excuse that I often heard at the beginning was that they turned it off because of COVID, and they didn't want people in COVID not to get money that they were entitled to. But they just kept it off. And so one of the first tasks that all of the agency members of the task force have been given by me is that they have to write a report that is going to explain what the Biden administration did for 4 years to perpetuate fraud and what we've done immediately to turn all those systems back on. And that's one of the first things we're trying to get a handle on is how bad did it get? Why did it get that way? Who was responsible for that? And what have we done to at least turn those systems back on? But then there's a lot more to do. A lot of these agencies need to develop technological solutions to automate fraud preventions. With the right type of data, a lot of our fraud assessments can be made automatically. You don't necessarily need a human sort of checking every individual thing. You can create automated systems that can flag potential fraudulent payments, and that's the way you really stop the fraud. It's not just prosecutions, although those are incredibly important. There aren't enough prosecutors in America to recover all the fraudulently taken money. The way to really stop the fraud, the way to really protect the American taxpayer is to keep it in the agency, to prevent it from going out the door, and that's what we're going to help the agencies do, is build up better systems, automatic systems to prevent fraud, to detect fraud, and to work with the Department of Justice to go after the people who do get the money through fraud.
I would love to take a look at some of those reports when they come out. I will have my team follow up on that. In the meantime, I want to play something that Stephen Miller said yesterday. I literally stopped in my tracks. I couldn't believe it. He has tried to get the names of SNAP beneficiaries in Minnesota. Listen to what he said.
We do not know the names of any SNAP recipient in the state of Minnesota. We just get a blank check. We have asked the state repeatedly and tried to compel the state unsuccessfully to turn over their SNAP enrollment rolls so we could ascertain such basic facts as, are these people even legally eligible to receive these benefits? And the state has refused, absolutely categorically refused. And in fact, the state has spent millions of dollars in court for the singular purpose of trying to prevent the state from ascertaining the identity of a single SNAP recipient in the entire state of Minnesota.
Why would Walz spend millions of dollars in courts to keep these names from you?
Probably because I think if the federal government ever got these data, it would reveal the unbelievable extent of SNAP fraud in the state of Minnesota. And I think this would be true in a lot of blue states. But this highlights an important thing that the task force is going to work on. We're going to make sure that all of the agencies have maxed out their statutory authority to prevent fraud, including adopting new regulations if that's necessary. But I guarantee you that we're going to reach a point where it's clear that Congress has designed some of these programs that make fraud very easy. And so one of the things the task force will end up proposing is going to be legislation to make sure that the federal government actually has the power to stop fraud, so that we're not sending off blank checks to the states and just hoping that these blue states are going to do right by the American people. They have demonstrated clearly and unambiguously that they aren't going to do right by the American people, that they are going to allow this fraud to propagate throughout their states, and we're going to have to stop it. And we should all be incredibly thankful that we have a hero like Stephen Miller, who has been on this from the very drop, has been fighting to protect Americans from fraud, and I'm very, very proud to serve with him on the president's task force.
My computer is lit up for months asking for how we stop fraud. And for the first time today, I feel like we have gotten some answers. And on behalf of our viewers who have contacted me, thank you, FTC Commissioner Andrew Ferguson.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.